All right, welcome everybody to episode 12 of the podcast, where we're doing a panel on science fiction and fantasy cover art and cover design. And today I have an amazing cast of guests. I'm very happy you could all join me. Starting off, we have Daniel Dociu. He's an award-winning sci-fi and fantasy artist in the entertainment industry, who's also worked as an art director and concept artist for some of the most prominent video game publishers and developers, including Guild Wars, which Felix and I were talking about earlier. And we love that game. He's also done freelance work for publications, advertising, film, and more. So thank you for being here, Daniel. How are you?
My pleasure. I'm doing great. Looking forward to our chat.
Me too. Thank you so much. And next on the panel is Alyssa Winans. She's an illustrator, animator, and game artist who currently works for the Google Doodle team. She's also done work for clients such as Harmonix, Tor Books, Tor.com Publishing, Warner Animation Group, and more. Happy to have you here, Alyssa.
Oh, happy to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you too. And also joining us is Felix Ortiz. He's a graphic designer and digital artist whose work has graced the covers of numerous fantasy and science fiction books, both traditionally published and self-published. So glad to have you on the panel, Felix.
My pleasure.
And next is Priscilla Kim. She's an illustrator and concept artist with a focus on covers and portraiture. Some of her past clients include Tor.com, Fantasy Flight, Uncanny Magazine, X Prize, and more. She also has a deep love for games and books, particularly sci-fi and fantasy. So you're in the right place, Priscilla. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Good to be here.
And finally, we have Luke Tarzian. He's a self-published fantasy author and freelance cover artist and book designer. He's best known for his novel Vultures, book 1 in the Shadow Twins series, as well as the adjacent Monster series, including the World Maker Parable and the recently released The World Breaker Requiem. Just because of when we're recording this podcast, it's not actually out yet, but it will be by the time the episode is released. So thank you for joining us, Luke, and congratulations on the release of your new book.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, and I apologize in advance.
What is that, man? Apologize to your fans. No?
Have you seen my Twitter presence?
You're a beautiful mess, and I love it.
I gotta keep in character.
Exactly, man. Well, happy to have you all here, and I'm very excited to discuss cover art and cover design. As a former tattoo artist, I love art, but you know, as a writer, I also love science fiction and fantasy. So it's great to see how these two artistic, creative forms of expression converge. And I'm looking forward to hearing all of your perspectives. So starting off, we'll get everyone to say a little bit more about themselves, as well as your respective art styles and what art means to you as a form of expression. So Daniel, we'll start with you.
Oh my. I was born and grew up in Transylvania. So dig up all your Dracula jokes, and I challenge to come up with one that I haven't heard yet. I studied industrial design, worked as a product designer, then went into teaching back in the old country at the same school that I graduated from. Then in the summer of '89, got out of the country. It was right before the fall of the Iron Curtain, and managed to get out and spent almost 2 years in Athens, Greece, working as a graphic designer for a science company until we finally got accepted as political refugees by the U.S. Moved here in late 1990, and after a couple of years of working as a toy designer, finally got into video games, and I've been working as an art director in video games ever since '93. Worked for a number of publishers, developers, a long list of titles, some more successful than others, and occasionally do freelance, whether for film or book covers or whatever clients throw my way.
Hmm. And what about your art style? If you could explain a little bit about how you approach the art that you create.
Oh my, how much time do you have? Style is something that I can
5 hour
talk your
podcast.
head off. And um, I have a rather, unorthodox or potentially unpopular position on style. I believe that style should be kind of the organic expression of content. It should not be something that you kind of fabricate or invent or uh, fully calcify ahead of time, but rather you know allow the content as it evolves uh, during the development cycle. And I refer in particular to video games, which have a long development cycle. So a lot of variables, people come and go, the components of the team changes, the talent on the team, moves around, and all of that should be allowed to influence the outcome. I use this analogy a lot. I compare an art style with a crust of an artisanal cheese, where the ingredients, the milk, the fat, the herbs that go into the cheese, matters uh, a lot, but so does the environment, the temperature of the cave where it's aged, and the humidity and all of that. So it's where content meets the context. That's what that's how I think about style, rather than here's the guys mixing whatever ingredients they can find, and here's the marketing team in the other end of the figuring out colorful graphics and silk screen them on a plastic balloon, and then pour the mix into the balloon, and they call it cheese. That's the commercial approach to style. It's reverse engineered from marketing considerations, and I'm not much of a fan of that
Yeah.
approach.
So from your perspective, it's more like everything is constantly in conversation with each other, and all of it coming together in a
In a
cohesive,
natural, organic,
exactly,
it's
fermenting, so to
fluid.
say.
Yeah, it's why I don't believe in and never have used or put in place style guides or style Bibles, because
Right.
that would entail having it all figured out ahead of time, and all of it being the result of one creative mind. And I don't believe there's one singular, or with maybe extremely rare exceptions, one singular visionary capable of a vision as rich and complex and deep as if you allow multiple contributors to the process.
Yeah, I like that. And Priscilla, do you want to let listeners know a little bit more about you, and then how you approach art, and tell them a little bit about your style as well?
Sure. Well, so I started off actually as an associate producer in games. Worked there at CCP for 5 or so years before the studio got shut down. And then from there, I moonlighted a little bit in animation, and then uh, went into slot machine art, and then started freelancing. Kind of jumped in and out from full-time freelancing to doing like day job slot machine stuff, and basically lots of eggs in different baskets, freelancing, conventions, slot machine things, and whatnot. So I've never really gone to school for art per se, but I've also taken too many online courses and that sort of really call myself self-taught. But
That's the best
as
way to
far
do
as
things.
yeah, as far as my style goes, I guess it's one of those things where I have things that I kind of like what Daniel was saying. It's just sort of the thing that shakes out from what I'm interested in. So I've just made the stuff that popped into my head and I was interested in, and had goals for each individual piece that I've done. And I guess my style is whatever came out of that at the end when I have a body of work. There is a certain amount of guiding, I guess, because I do have somewhat eclectic interests, and sometimes that expresses itself in um, different outcomes, I guess. But that's still all me. It's just a matter of what I present as far as this is the kind of stuff that I do when I like to do book covers, and this is the kind of stuff that I do when I like to do game illustration and that sort of thing, or RPG character art or whatever.
Yeah, and all the while staying flexible
And-
and letting your expression take its truest form, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I do generally tend to focus on fantasy realism stuff, just because I like magic and I like weapons and slightly medieval historical fantasy stuff. And I really like the sort of delicacy and subtlety that you can get with realism, especially in terms of lighting and skin tone and anatomy and all that.
Yeah, and that's where something like portraiture comes in too, where there's a bit of
a
lot of focus on the face. And
exactly.
yeah, also like your use of colors is really nice too, because it's not
thank you.
not like so bland as a lot of a lot of realism can get into bland territory depending on the color palette, but your inclusion of fantasy elements really brightens things up. So cool.
I
And
do like my glowy stuff.
yeah, exactly. And Felix, what about you? If you could introduce yourself a little bit and then get into your style.
Yeah, my name is Felix. My style, I'm still trying to kind of define it, but it feels fairly traditional. I feel like I was formed by D&D, anime, and Fraceta, basically, back in the 80s. And then, the D&D artists like Keith Parkinson and Jeff Easley and all these guys from back then, Brom, they that's kind of the base for me, and plus anime and Fraceta he's a god, right? So I feel like from then I was a teenager, but that was not my career all this time. I was a graphic designer. I became an illustrator for real only a few years ago when I started doing cover art for the people Rob Hayes and Michael Fletcher, all these guys who are indie publishers. And I got there through Facebook, basically doing the Grim Dark group, readers and writers, I think it's called. And I started posting just like fan art and stuff, and then people started hiring me, and it's been kind of slow, but now I'm booked pretty much all the time. So that's kind of my very quick overview. I never stopped drawing, but I didn't take it seriously until 2014, maybe something like that. That's when I really jumped in. I quit my job, spent like 6 months just drawing, then spent all my money, right? Because that's what happens. Then went back to work, but then I kind of balanced it. At night I paint, the day I work, and yeah, that's pretty much it. After that, I kind of have a steady flow.
But it's beautiful because your story involves indie authors contracting and boosting an indie cover artist, and it's just this nice back and forth where the self-published people, the indie people are boosting each other up, to the point where Felix is going to start working for traditional publishers and leave the indies behind now.
I did a couple for Tor, but I feel like at the time, that was a couple of years ago, I feel like your skill goes kind of like that, and I feel like I need a little more polishing before. I feel like maybe next year I'll try again and show portfolio. That was out of nowhere, actually. They just contacted me, but I feel like to get like a steady traditional work, I'll have to maybe pitch more and sharpen a little more my style, and work a little harder. But yeah, it's an eventuality. I feel like
the trajectory is there,
soon,
so it's all good. Yeah, Cool. And Alyssa, what about you?
Yeah, so I grew up in Illinois and I studied illustration in school, went to school out in Rhode Island. Now I live in California where there's like no winter where I am, which is weird. Um, I've been in the industry for about 10 years now, and like we mentioned before, I did get my start in games. Worked on console games for a few years, and then went to mobile. And now I guess I still sort of work in games with my day job on Doodles, although like web games, and I'm never quite sure whether people consider those real games or not. But I haven't been doing book covers that long, actually. I've only been doing them since 2018, so still relatively new, but enjoying it a lot. In terms of style, I'm probably a lot flatter than a lot of art that you see in the fantasy sci-fi world. At least that's my perception of it. I don't know why I work that way. I think it's probably the influence of when I was working in games, I'd work on a lot of different projects, which would have different styles. So I think that some of that influences kind of brought me to where I am today. So I work kind of in a more flat, very highly colorful style, like Priscilla. Love the colors. So that's probably how I would describe how I work. So that's
Yeah.
me.
And a little bit more stylistic, away from realism and more towards a lot more stylized. And I
Mm.
especially love the covers that you did for Niveau's novellas. I can't remember the name of the series, but I think the
Singing
Empress of Salt
Hills.
and the Empress of Salt and Fortune was a really, really, really nice cover. And then
Oh,
when the tiger comes down the mountain or came down the mountain, I think it's called. Yeah. But listeners, viewers, go check out those covers because they're super cool.
thank you.
And Luke, if you could tell everyone a little bit more about yourself and then your artistic style and your approach to design.
Yeah, I'm Luke. I primarily write fantasy. I actually got my background is actually in art. That's what I studied in school for a while, and then once I got to college, I stopped doing it for whatever reason and focused primarily on writing. I didn't really pick illustration up again until after I graduated college, and I didn't really seriously get back into art until probably couple of years ago when I was getting ready to self-publish Vultures. Um, it was one of those things I sort of figured, hey, I can do my own cover art, save money that way, and people ended up liking the stuff that I did. It was weird. It wasn't really traditional, and so I guess a lot of my style is just I like stuff that's sort of suggestive as opposed to like something that's completely detailed. And that's I think I get that from my writing process as well. I'm sort of sparse with things. I like to leave it up to the imagination. But a lot of the stuff I've been working on lately, for whatever reason, I got back into reading the Sandman graphic novels. So there was this weird sort of mashup of like the Dave McKean style with the tarot cards from Dragon Age Inquisition.
Nice. Yeah, the art style on that video game is beautiful as well.
Yeah.
And Luke, since we're on you, since you're also an author,
Mhm.
how do you feel, compare and contrast between being able to express yourself visually as well as texturally through the words that you write?
Yeah. I like the thing I like about doing the cover art is that I feel like hyper oh my god, what's the word? I have a very specific image for things, and so it's for my own stuff. It's very pleasing to be able to actually yank that out of my head. I mean, I don't know what else to say besides that. I think it's in some ways it can be a little jarring considering the stuff that comes out of my head when I write, and so seeing some of that manifest visually is definitely a little weird sometimes.
Yeah. But it's a cool feeling though, just being
Yeah.
able to, um, yeah, like you say, pluck ideas from your head and then create it and have it be a physical thing, you know,
Yeah.
a physical expression of that idea. And I wanted to get everyone's first experiences with doing a book cover, you know, what that process was like, but also how it felt to do a cover for the first time. So Daniel, we'll start with you on that one.
Well, you caught me unprepared for this question. I can't
Apologies.
I can't remember the very first cover I did. I'm pretty sure it was for Tor. Irene Gallo was the art director, and I did you know, a few, more than a handful of covers for her, but I can't remember to save my life which was the first one.
It's okay. But how was the experience for you of working with a publisher?
It was very, very smooth. You know, I've been very fortunate to work with art directors who are, you know, very, very hands off, and I made it. I explained my process ahead of time before, you know, shaking hands, and I explained that I don't do sketches. I don't. Uh, None of that. It's like, you know, you kind of give me a solid, eloquent, creative brief enough to trigger, you know, rich imagery, and then, you know, I do it and I send it in, and if you like it, you pay me. If you don't, I'm fine, and I'll just add it to my portfolio. But I don't engage in that back and forth. I simply don't have the time, and I find it kind of, you know, drags me down, bogs me down creatively. So I've been very, very, again, lucky to work with art directors like Irene or Lauren Panepinto over at Orbit, who just kind of, you know, hey, are you up for another cover? Yes. Here's the deadline. Here's the, you know, a paragraph. It's all we have at the moment, and go for it. And so
That's amazing. But it sounds like your approach takes the creative inspiration to its fullest potential based on what your process is like, you know, avoiding the back and forth of sketches and this is my idea, trying to sort of use the sketches as a way to potentially pitch them on ideas. It's like, no, I'm just gonna go for it. And
well, I think that the art directors I've worked with felt themselves lucky that I wasn't requesting much input from them, because you know, almost without exception, they commissioned these covers before the book was written, you know, so they really have next to nothing to base their input on, you know. At best they'll squeeze a couple of sentences out of the writer, or, you know, a few lines of dialogue. Well, make the best out of that. And I think they feel, you know, relieved that I'm not pestering them with requests for additional information, and they just, you know, go to your room and doodle kind of thing, and you know, come out when it's dinner time. So yeah, that's. I mean, the one experience that was the complete polar opposite was, you know, were a couple of covers I did for National Geographic, and that was, you know, something else. I mean, more cooks in the kitchen that you can think of, and, you know, all kind of historians and scientists, and everybody have their own, you know, 2 cents and think that their branch of science is the most important, and they want those little aspects to make sure that are brought to the forefront in the cover. And it was like
all of it just killing the creativity.
It was more creativity. The creative process was, at the end of the day, the result of design by committee. So that aside, just the stress and of the back and forth and trying to make sure everybody is happy with the result, not necessarily from an emotional resonance standpoint, but from the accuracy of the information that was conveyed in the image. So
yeah, well, it is National Geographic, so they want to have the most scientifically accurate art they can possibly.
Yeah, I mean, just as an example, this helmet of a warrior, and so the warrior wears a helmet and has these plumes, and there's this one scientist who specializes in dyeing technology in the whatever 10th century or whatever, and he makes sure that the hue of red that I'm using is achievable through vegetal dyeing processes, and your red is a little off. Oh, shoot me. So, but that kind of level of attention to the detail from multiple scientists that have very narrow areas of expertise, and they all converge, and you have to make sure everything is represented to their liking, was something else. It
That's
pays
amazing.
well, though, so at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I can't complain, and I signed up for a second one, and yeah.
Amazing. And Alyssa, in contrast to the craziness of National Geographic, what was your first book cover experience like?
Definitely sounds more straightforward than that. So I think this is the first one that came. I did a cover for An Illusion of Thieves by Kate Glass back in, I think it came out later, but I was working on it in 2018. And that was with Tor Books, and the art director was Irene Gallo. And I was terrified because I hadn't done a book cover before. But luckily I'd sort of been, and actually didn't do a lot of freelance illustration at that time anyway. I had tried to, but all of my work pretty much came from either my game jobs or even, through those jobs, game freelance work. But I've been kind of eased into it because I've been doing some digital covers for Tor.com, working with the same art director. So I kind of had a little idea of what to expect, but actually I found it kind of relaxing. So my day job, actually, I don't think it's quite as intense as National Geographic, but there are a lot of different stakeholders involved in the kind of work that we do there. And I'm sort of the person who has to sort of manage all that different feedback and figure out what's important and sort through that. So it's kind of nice actually working on book covers where, I had a great art director who managed all of that feedback that was probably coming in behind the scenes and giving me just straightforward feedback. So I didn't have to do all that sorting. So it was kind of like, oh, actually, this is a little bit more relaxing ultimately than my day job. But generally, I enjoy that process even through different art directors and different projects. So
yeah, but it's good. I mean, you have that day job, freelance contrast, and you're able to, I guess, appreciate the positives of both sides, just based on the fact that you have this difference in how the project works and how you can approach it.
definitely.
Cool. And Felix, what about you? What was your first book cover?
My first one was actually a free cover, but so I guess let's start with that one. The first one, I thought I could potentially do an illustration, just so I wrote on that group, Facebook group, right? I want to get into this. Whoever writes me first, I'll do a cover for them for free, just like that. And so Timandra Whitecastle, she wrote me on Facebook, and so I did what at the time what the best I could do. It's still around somewhere. I think it's called Blood Witch or Bloodstone Witch. I feel like it is, and that was for free. But paid was oh my god, Truth or Darkness. I think it was called. And the thing with when I started, I didn't have any other commissions. I didn't have kids back then. I had all the time in the world, so I charged very little and spent like a whole month in the like at night, after work, just like, what should I do? I did like 3 versions. I'm like super insecure in what I'm doing. I kind of know how to draw, and I kind of feel like I know what's gonna be good or bad, but you don't have the muscle memory. You don't have the experience. That counts for so much. Like knowing you don't have to think twice about anything. Just do it, and so that I didn't have that yet. So it took forever. But in the end, I liked it. I still like it. I feel like if I, look at it again. But I mean, it was thrilling, and that was the first time I think I worked with Sean King also, who's a great designer.
He does.
So that was. I feel like that was probably the
typography and that
first.
kind of thing.
Yeah, he's amazing. I think that was the first one. Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of work, but I enjoyed every moment. And the author, all these indie authors, 99.9% of them have been great to me. I feel like I'm friends with them. I chat with them often. They're a cool group. In general. So I really like it.
Yeah, and it's like I mentioned before, this sort of like indie community, everyone supporting each other, whether it's through the writing or through the art, or like in the case of Sean, through typography and um and more of like the design of the cover on top of the art itself. So yeah, I mean, just from my interactions on Twitter, everyone's very welcoming to each other and supportive, and it's really nice.
They're goofballs and they're funny,
Yeah, for sure. Especially Michael Fletcher. He's a shithead.
Yeah, yeah,
He's
yeah.
hilarious.
He's like I really consider him a friend.
Yeah.
At this point, I've done like 6 covers for him, I think. So yeah, we have a relationship. Rob Hayes too.
Yeah. And
a few others, Matt Larkin. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Priscilla, what was your first book cover experience like?
My first book cover was for a role-playing game, actually, that I don't think ever actually came out, to be honest. So it's still sitting in my folder that will never be released. And I did a couple of other covers for different things, like a little bit of Tour.com. I did a music album cover for a friend. I think the first one that actually came out was probably a self-published cover, I want to say, or maybe it was a role-playing one. But generally my cover experiences have been pretty similar in that they're fairly smooth. Sometimes there's some detail they want to go with a different sketch than maybe the one I would have preferred, but it's their cover. I did, admittedly, even from the very beginning, put in the 3 revision rounds clause, so that probably helps avoid some of the horror stories I've heard from other artists.
Like way too much back and forth.
Yeah, but I mean, it's been pretty good and generally fairly chill.
Awesome. And Luke, what about you? Do you remember your first book cover experience? Well, I guess in your case, it was your own book, correct?
Yeah, I guess I technically have 3 first cover experiences. And this sort of ties into my decision to self-publish. So my mom actually passed away a few years ago from leukemia, and when she was diagnosed, it was very sudden. And my mom had always been like my biggest supporter of my writing. We read a lot of the same books, and so my whole thing was, I want my mom to be able to like hold a physical copy of my book, and so that's sort of where the decision to self-publish came, and that's sort of where the cover art tied into. And so I did a mock-up for Shadow Twins Vultures, and I got them printed. The book wasn't even finished yet, but So I have I have the early cover sitting on my bookshelf in my office, and I have my first cover following that was the actual release for Vultures, and I think I threw that one together maybe a week or two before it was supposed to come out. I'd had a previous cover, and I'm super OCD about everything, so I was like, I had seen something and thought, I don't like my old cover anymore. I'm just going to change it because why not? I ended up changing Vultures 3 times, but that's neither here nor there. Um, but fast forwarding, so my first paid cover, I believe I did last December. It was for a self-published title, Dark Oak by Jacob Sanix, and he'd been referred to me through another self-published author, and so we kind of chatted back and forth about my style, what he was looking to do, which was a rebrand for his series. And I'd say going into it, I was pretty confident, but once I actually got into actually doing the art, it was like, okay, I'm doing this for somebody else now, so I'm gonna just freak out mentally for a while because I think it's definitely a different feeling. It's not as, I guess for me, it wasn't as leisurely doing a cover for somebody else as it was for myself initially. But luckily, it worked out. There wasn't a lot of back and forth. I have a similar process to Daniel, where I don't go into anything. I don't do sketches. Say, give me the brief, and then we'll see what happens. A lot of my process is very just throw the paint on the canvas and see what happens, and just communicate with the author as I'm going through it. That way we can make any changes along the way as necessary.
Right. And Luke, you just touched on sort of your experiences with self-publishing authors and doing commissions. Felix, do you want to get in on this as well? We're going to dig into some of the nitty-gritty of SFF publishing and book covers and stuff like that. But do you want to elaborate on what Luke said about your experiences with how a project with a self-published author usually starts, or at least a couple of examples?
Yeah, it's very straightforward, and it's person to person. There's no intermediate or anything like that, and so I usually get an email. I ask a few questions like genre, what do you have any samples of things you like, or from me or other people, doesn't matter, or general idea like 3 characters fighting or a dragon or whatever. Then I start asking questions. Sometimes they send me really long briefs, which is fine. Sometimes very, very, very brief, and I ask questions, which I kind of prefer that way. And then I do sketches. I do a couple, like 2, 3 maybe, and I always point to the one I like. I say these 3 might work, but this is the one I want to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't.
Just very determined. Like, I like this one. Choose this one.
Oh yeah, I don't. Yeah, I tell them. Sometimes it's, I don't know. Maybe they'll say like, "Oh, but make it red or make it big or whatever." Like, I'll do it because you're paying me, but I'm not gonna like it. I tell them I don't think it works. I don't think it works. I'll do it, but but because these people are you can talk to clients like that if you have like a good communication. You're doing it for them too in a way. You're putting your expertise there, so they kind of, maybe they'll change their mind. Who knows? But yeah, after the sketch, it's just I do the back and forth also. I do sketches and I do I start because I don't want people to change their mind halfway, or at the end when I'm done and suddenly, oh, I don't know, maybe we should have added that dragon in the background. It's like, damn it, dragon, really? Like, so that's a lot, right? So that's like a big change. So I like to sort of every so often, when I think it's a good I say like a milestone, or I say like landmark or something, whatever. like a good spot to show the client. Then I'll send an email like, hey, what do you think? And then I just keep going. And usually I would say it takes me about a week maybe of that. It's hard to say with each because I work sometimes on 2 or 3 at a time, but I want to say like a week if you squeeze all the hours. That's probably right. And yeah, it's very straightforward, really.
Mm-hmm. And does anyone else have some experiences with self-published or indie authors that they want to share? Sort of like how a project takes shape. If Priscilla, you've done any covers for self-published authors?
I have, yeah. I mean, I don't think my experience is particularly different from Felix's. They will send me a description of what they're looking for. Oftentimes they send me a copy of the book as well, and if I can, I try to read at least some of it, or they'll point out like a particular passage of descriptions and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I will do 2 or 3 sketches and point out like, hey, I think this one would work for, actually, particularly for authors that are doing a series. I'll try to point out that, hey, you kind of want to keep all of the covers fairly similar so that they look like they're part of a series.
Right.
Like I did a second cover or a couple covers for this one author. And so the first cover I did, particularly whatever she liked. And then the second one I said, I'm giving you these other sketches as well, but I think we should probably go with this one because it's the most similar in terms of setup and composition to the first one. So it looks like it's, still part of the same thing.
Yeah. Create a unified visual style.
They've all been true. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Actually, on that point, Daniel, since, I'm thinking specifically of The Expanse, how do you have your project sort of taken shape? You touched on it a little bit earlier with Irene and Tor, but also for something that's like a series, and especially The Expanse, which has 9, I believe it's 9 books. So you've done 9 covers for that series. How do you approach something like that? Where you have this unified visual style across all of the books, but at the same time have a little bit more uniqueness to each cover.
Actually, it was 9 covers for the regular series, and then 9 more for the collector's edition.
That's right.
Which is a different publisher. It's Subterranean, and the original series was published by Orbit. But when they commissioned the first one, I had no idea that it's going to be a series, nor did the authors. They were basically planning on putting out the first book and sink or swim, see if it does well, and if it does, then they were gonna follow up, and then one book's success led to the next one. So there wasn't any planning for the series as a whole, or for the stylistic unity ahead of time. The unity, the stylistic consistency, if there is any, is simply the expression of me being the same person with the same values, the same kind of likes and dislikes, and the same, as I put it, the same itches to scratch. I really look at artistic expression as almost like an irresistible urge to share your emotions or ideas or whatever, and it's almost a physical sensation, almost a kind, which is why I compare it to an itch that you have to scratch. And that I mean, honest artistic expression reflects who you are, and you evolve over time, but over a relatively short period of time, you are more or less the same person. Therefore, your output by itself, shows consistency and unity. So yeah, there wasn't any preliminary planning for major success or the big full bringing it full circle or any of that. No.
Yeah. And out of curiosity, did you do any of the artwork for, because they have a ton of short stories and novellas within that series as well. Did you do any of the artwork for that as well?
I did the cover for the collection of short stories.
Okay. The one that's coming out next year.
I think so. Again, it was commissioned before they put the book together. But I remember vividly that the last one I did was a collection of short stories, they told me. And literally what I had to work with were a few lines of dialogue. And I'm like, what am I going to do with this? But here's the thing. The fact that the artwork, there's a definite disconnect, a definite gap between the imagery on the cover and what the book talks about. And ironically, it served the series well. They insisted that I keep doing it this way before I read the books, because they found that it was the imagery on the covers was intriguing, and it was leading to speculation, and people were kind of going, after reading the book, going back and trying to make sense of the artwork on the cover, and that kept them kind of engaged. And the authors thought that it was more of a plus than a minus. So yeah.
Yeah. And now that the whole series is published, eventually you'll get around to reading it and piecing together your artwork with the words in the pages.
Yeah, great art. Great art is great art. It'll catch your eye no matter what. So
yeah. And I mean, literally, it's like, do you judge a book by its cover, or but for me personally, I pick up a book a lot of the times based on the cover, and if the book inside actually satisfies me and has me intrigued, like you said, Daniel, I'll go back and look at the cover, compare the two. Sometimes it doesn't match up, but it doesn't matter, because both are intriguing and satisfying in their own particular ways, in their own right.
I have a good example of that. Kings of the Wild by Nicolas Eames. You know this guy, Richard Anderson. He worked with you, Claptraps.
Sure.
He's awesome. And the characters, some of them have no connection to the ones on the book. They look completely different. But the covers is awesome.
Yeah.
The book is awesome, and it completely makes sense.
I'm not surprised that there's no connection between the content and the artwork. In Richard's case, I mean, I've known Richard since his first job out of school was working for me, and he was for the longest time a production artist, a 3D modeler, and doodling on the side, and getting better and better. And at some point he said, you know what, I'm done with this. I want to be a concept artist. And I said, okay, let's give that a shot. And he's just incredible. I can't speak highly enough of his talent. And I also know his background. I mean, he comes from a small town in Montana with no, artistic influence, or no, there was really nothing in his habitat that was conducive to him becoming what he was. I mean, he literally was telling stories that the school that he went with in middle school was so small they used to ride their horse to school, and literally they had one of those wooden things, like a fence in front, like you see in the westerns, like a saloon.
Instead
And
of parking
they
your bike, you
tie-
park your horses.
they tie the horse to that thing and go in. I mean, and how in the world that guy evolved into one such a powerful and unique and stylish character, it blows my mind.
Yeah, but that's the power of the imagination and hard work. A lot of it comes down to hard work, And Felix, Nick is a friend of mine, and he loves Richard's covers. So it's like, it doesn't matter. Doesn't give a shit if it doesn't match up. They're beautiful.
Oh yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, because it's like capture the eye, and then the words capture the soul.
Yeah,
like the words inside the book. Alyssa, what about you? What's your if you want to delve in a little bit more into your experiences with traditional publishers, and how sort of like projects begin and then take shape, but also if you want to delve into a little bit how you approach a project and decipher what kind of medium best fits that particular one.
Sure. So a lot of my projects have been fairly similar in setup. The main difference tends to be whether I get the manuscript or not. So for the ones that I don't get the manuscript, a lot of the times the art directors will have fairly specific briefs for me, at least in my experience. Have not experienced it getting, a few lines of text situation. So in those cases, usually I'm just trying to sort of match what they've got in their minds. So they've already figured out what they want, which is actually kind of good for me because if I don't have the manuscript, that's all I've got to go on. So those are usually a little bit of a different kind of situation where I will, like Felix, I prefer to check in more frequently to make sure everybody's on the same page so there's no backtracking or nobody is shocked when they've seen the color and they're like, why is it green?
Wasted time, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So I will check in a little bit more in those cases just because I can tell that they want something specific. And so I want to be like, am I getting it? Is this what you're looking for? That kind of thing. Most of my projects, though, have been more open-ended. Well, they'll give me the manuscript and they're like, think about it. Here's like some key like notes about like what the character might look like or things like that. But otherwise, a lot of the times they're like, do what you will, which I actually really enjoy that. I love reading the manuscripts. I love the projects where I get to do that. Fortunately, I've never had a rush job where I wasn't able to have the time to read it if I was given it. So I've always had enough time to both read, digest, and usually go back and kind of start pulling out the things that I think are important. A lot of the narratives that I've been given they're literal, right? They're stories, but you could tell the author was trying to say other things in their stories. A lot of my novella projects have been sort of that way. So the second time I go through, what I try to do is figure out themes of what I think is important, more so than, matching looks or things like that. Just figure out like the general vibe, the kind of tone that I think a reader might like to see to get a sense of like, hey, if I open this book, am I going to be like really shocked based on what I saw on the cover? Just trying to sort of match those expectations. So those are things that are going through my mind as I read and start thinking about these things. And then I also do sketches, usually 3, send them in, see what kind of comes back, and then go from there. When I'm working with those more open-ended projects, I will just do one more check-in, which is just color, because I'm very into the color. It can be a lot, especially if you're used to working with folks that are coming from a little more restrained art styles. So I just want to make sure that, especially when the fact is like books are to sell books and marketing has certain ideas about what might sell, I want to make sure that everything's okay there. So that's usually my last check-in before the final there. I think that's my process is pretty straightforward in that regard. I think, very like typical illustration, like sketch, block in the color, do the detail, and that's it. So nothing fancy.
And everyone here, I'm curious. All of you are working digitally, correct? But have any of you ever done covers or commissions that are physical mediums? Like physical, like paint on canvas or anything like that, or is it more like the industry and the way it works and the way that revisions and changing concepts and all that, does digital seem to be the most convenient and approachable medium?
Yeah, I abandoned traditional media a long time ago because I was moving so much. I was moving all the time, and I used to have a room with my thing was acrylics and markers and ink. But it's like a kind of mixed media. But then I started moving so much. At some point, I stopped because it was just too crazy to carry around all that stuff. And I was doing more and more digital stuff on my own, though. That was pre covers. So even I'll doodle sometimes, especially for my kids. But I don't do any traditional right now.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
Anyone should pay me for traditional. So
What was that?
I don't think anyone should pay me for traditional, considering my lack of skills with them. So
Same.
For
Well,
the first probably good 10 years of my career in games, I was doing all my maybe even longer. I was doing all my concept art in traditional media, and then uh, be- exactly as you said, for convenience, I switched to digital. It was the more comfortable I was getting, with digital media, uh, the lazier I got, because traditional media, you know, requires some certain discipline. It's less forgiving, and with my workday being constantly interrupted by meetings, you paint for 15 minutes, you're all a mess, your hands are dirty, you have to run, wash your hands, for a meeting, get out. I actually used to joke and say, the only difference between traditional media and digital media is that when you use traditional media, you have to wash your hands before you go to the bathroom as well.
Like a
But,
mechanic.
yeah, very much so. So, over time, the convenience of and then not to mention the undos, which are
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
the best thing ever.
Doing a history.
Having a long history and going 50 steps back, oh my goodness.
Or being
Doesn't
able
get
to save
any better.
multiple versions of a single project.
I never do that, and I wish I had the
Risk
discipline
taker.
to do that. But I've paid dearly for not doing it, many times.
Just gotta click save. Just gotta click save.
book covers are probably more for
Mm-hmm.
Jamie Jones.
yeah,
I think Michael Whalen still does
Sam Weber,
Stormlight covers,
Tron Wynn,
traditionally painted.
etc.
Yeah, that's
Whalen.
true. And Luke, we'll jump to you. I want to get everyone's opinions, because we kind of touched on it a little bit, but at what point do you feel that you are satisfied with the final product, but also the author or the publisher giving you the thumbs up that, like, yeah, I'm satisfied with this as well? So what has that been like for you, Luke?
As far as working with clients, it's been pretty smooth. I'll, once we've gone through it enough, I'll sort of give my input and say like, hey, like I think this looks good. Got it. Is there anything else that you wanted to incorporate? If there is, we'll go back and forth. It's usually a very smooth process for me. As far as my own covers, I'm never satisfied. I think I'm done when I get to the point of hating looking at the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm tired of my own work. Done with it. Yeah, I totally understand that. For me, when I was doing tattoos, it was kind of like the design process. I always got to that point where I'm like, just like tired of this. But then I get that whole next level of satisfaction when I would actually put it onto somebody's skin and be like, I'm happy
Yeah,
with
exactly.
it again.
Yeah, speaking of an unforgiving medium.
Holy shit, tattoos it's permanent. And people, but it's this weird thing where regardless of everything that I would put into it, whether it's design work, whether it's the actual tattoo itself, I would always tell clients, I've done 50%, and that's the most I can do in this circumstance. The other 50% is in your hands because it's on your body. You have to go through the healing process and take care of the tattoo. And then you have to take care of the tattoo for the rest of your life in the sense of, if you're going to go to the beach, put on some sunscreen, or that thing's going to fade over time. So I would always be very explicit about that, but a lot of the times is disappointing when, I would create an aftercare form that I would give to clients and be like, this is how you take care of your tattoo. And some people just don't listen. And I would get messages. Oh, I went on a beach trip like the weekend after I got my tattoo and this happened and it's fucked up. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. It is, because you went to the beach and you swam and you had sun exposure and all this different stuff. And yeah, Daniel, like you say, it's super unforgiving. Which is where the exhaustive element of being a tattoo artist comes in. And now I'm relaxed and doing podcasts, so it's all good.
I feel like most
over
people
time,
who get tattoos don't actually understand what they're getting themselves into. I'm speaking as somebody who has tattoos as well.
Yeah.
It's not just letting somebody ink your body and then going, all right, I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at my arms. It's like I have
that's
enough
what
evidence.
pirates do,
Over time, I've gotten many requests for artwork, for concept art that I did for games early in my career, for people to tattoo those designs on. Hey, this was the game that opened my eyes to video games in 1993, 1995. Would you still have that piece of artwork? And invariably, I say that I lost it. I don't have it anymore, because I look at it and I'm like, dude, this is bad art. I'm not gonna do this to you. I don't care how much you love it. I'm not gonna make it available to you.
I'm curious, what games?
Say again?
I'm curious to what games you're talking about from 90.
There was this game called Secret of Evermore, which was kind of continuation, or in the same spirit of Secret of Mana. Was a square game. Was the first game I ever worked on in 1993 through 95, and to this day it has this kind of a cult following. I don't know. I really don't understand what it was, but people absolutely love it and think it was the best thing ever. And I'm like, what in the world?
Please don't put it out on your body. Don't tattoo.
Don't. Yeah. Another funny story about a tattoo. When we were about to release Guild Wars 2, I designed the logo for the game, and it was one of those things where negotiating it with marketing. It went on for weeks and months, and eventually my boss said, I don't like anything I'm getting from the advertising. Why don't you get busy and do something over the weekend? And I did this one thing, and he loved it, and it was adopted as the logo for the game. And we had this one programmer who was so in love with the logo that he took it right away to a tattoo parlor, and he tattooed it like gigantic on the side of this dragon on the side of his body. Huge. And he came back and showed it to us, and I was rolling my eyes. But then, I with a couple of colleagues, we agreed to pull this prank on him. And, next day by the water cooler, we were kind of talking amongst ourselves. He was on the side making his coffee, and I was like, have you heard that they changed the logo to Guild Wars? And the guy just went pale. I mean, you could see the blood drain out of his face. Dude, don't faint on me. We were just kidding. And he's like,
just messing with
you.
And of all places, he chose to get it on his ribs, which is one of the worst, most painful spots on the body to get a tattoo.
I think he was a little bit of a masochist, so he did that.
Everyone who has tattoos is a masochist. Oh my god, that's amazing. Does anyone else wanna we sidelined with tattoos, but on this point of satisfaction and feeling like the project is finished from both your side as the artist, but also from the publisher or the author, if anyone wants to jump in.
I at least for me, it's a mix of things between the budget, the time I've put on it, if I like it already, if the client is already super pumped about it. I feel like that all comes to a point where, all right, I think we're done. And yeah, so it's not very specific, because you can doodle for you can polish work forever if you wanted to. So it's a balance of money, time, satisfaction in general, at least for me.
Yeah,
it's kind of just a vibe. Yeah, I mean, there's usually a certain, honestly, I tend to feel like I maybe over polish the stuff that I do for other people because I'm a little bit anxious about it being good for other people versus this personal work that I do. So I probably work it just like a day or two too long. But usually I will send like a last almost final thing to the AD or the author, and then most of the time they don't really have too many comments, or if they do, it's small, and then they'll spend the extra day or two doing the final touches.
Yeah. Alyssa, Daniel, what about you?
I tend, when I more often than not, the deadlines that I get are pretty loose, and I have plenty of time. But I like to start relatively early and get it almost done, or almost to the point where I feel it's done, and then put it away and sit on it, and open it again every few days. And invariably, when I open it, I'm like, oh my god, I hate this thing. And then I touch that particular thing and put it away, and I feel like it's really done now. And then a few days later, I open it again, oh my god, I didn't see this. This really bugs me. So I allow for several revisions that are totally, self-inflicted. It's not feedback from the client that prompts them. But I do that all the way to the deadline, and then I send it in, and fingers crossed. And the period between when I send it and when I hear back, those few hours are unnerving as hell,
And Alyssa,
actually,
what about you?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I struggle with the last like 5% of a piece. So I actually do exactly what Daniel does, is like continue to keep pointing it away, give myself time for my eye to readjust, and keep going back to it until I feel like I'm like, okay, I think I've gotten everything that's going to bother me about it. And luckily the art directors have never given me trouble about that. But the one time I really wasn't satisfied with a piece, it must have been mutual, because like after I turned in, like many months later, they ended up marketing killed the piece. And I was like, I guess my instincts were on target there. So that was kind of really the only situation where I was just, I don't think I can make this better than it is. And I
Mhm.
guess they agreed. So
It's like, we're
um,
both in agreement. Yes. Okay.
yeah, let's not show anybody this.
And
That's interesting because I feel like I do have that day or two after instinct, but then after that one pass, for whatever reason, my eyes are like, that's cool. So it takes me like another month.
Yeah.
Oh, the oh no. Old art effect. It's rough. Looking at something a year later or more, it's like,
Actually, it's weird. I have the day after is bad. Month later, I'm like, oh no. And then a year later, I go, oh, yeah, it's fine. Okay.
and it's like, oh shit, what have I done? Does anyone have any experiences that they want to share of actually holding a physical copy of a book that you've done the cover for?
I have all the
Yeah.
books. All the books I ever did covers for. I have a big closet and it's full, and now I'm piling things up against the wall, and yeah, it's becoming a problem.
It's a good problem.
Well,
Exactly.
the kids always tell me, "Hey, Dad, there's always eBay." They say you sign it, and that will increase its value. Oh, come on! I don't want to deal with it.
They can take over that. That's their
Oh,
inheritance. So go for
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Anyone else have some experiences they want to share about seeing their physical book with their cover on it?
I don't think it's. I think for me personally, it's always just going to be a surreal thing because it's not something I ever could have imagined myself doing. If you asked me like 10 years ago, like, "Hey, are you going to do book covers?" Like, probably would have looked the other way. But doing it for clients and definitely getting to see my own book sitting on my shelf or in a bookstore and knowing like that's hey like I did my own covers. It's always really surreal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's trippy. I have a few that a couple I bought, a few the authors will send to me, and every time he's like, "Oh my god, I did that." I like look. I never thought I was gonna end up doing covers until I just decided to take the step. But yeah, I have a little shelf there with a bunch. It's awesome. I love it.
You'll show your kids and be like, "Be proud of your dad."
Yeah. At some point when they actually talk and understand, they'll get it. I
and
hope.
then they'll read those books and be like, "Holy shit, this is not what I was expecting." It's like, Rob
Yes.
Hayes, pretty violent stuff.
Dude,
Michael
Fletcher,
Fletcher,
forget
yeah.
it.
Like, who are you doing covers for?
My
Yeah,
kids are going to
exactly.
read mine someday and go, "Dad, what the hell's wrong with you?"
oh no.
I
I'm
feel like
sure
that's
they'll be really proud.
I
they're
would
like,
hope so.
"Dad, I'm proud, but you're twisted. I love you."
Maybe
Yeah,
our kids,
exactly.
maybe not if they're teenagers, but before or after that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'd say it's twisted in a different way than Michael Fletcher is twisted.
Yeah. It's like, kids,
I
you
think
can't read this until after you graduate. Go ahead, Alyssa.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've all had this experience. What is really exciting for me is growing up, I read most of my books from the library. And so whenever I like go to my local library, which I do pretty frequently, I don't know what's coming, right? But sometimes I'll go to the new book section, and once in a while, a cover I did will be in the new book section. And that's really the most like, it feels so real to know that just people can just check this out and like thousands of hands are going to touch this book. And it feels very legitimate. So that's
Yeah.
a really amazing feeling.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
And Priscilla, what about you?
Oh, kind of depends on how I feel about the final image. If I don't like it, or if I ended up not liking it after a while, then I just feel a little bit weird, and then I kind of slowly put it away. If I did like it, then it's really cool. Definitely the first time was just like, oh, holy shit, look at this. I have a physical copy of my book with my work on it.
Mm-hmm.
I have not had that experience with having it at bookstore because I haven't really done much traditional publishing in that sense. But I kind of get like a what's the word when compersion effect when I see the work of friends on just like randomly in the bookstore when I'm there. I'm like, oh look, hey, it's their stuff.
Send them a little picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now, Priscilla, you and Alyssa and Daniel Daniel, you have the most experience in the video game industry. I'm curious how, um, we touched on it a little bit, but how your experiences with that. Also, Daniel, you've done stuff for films and advertising. How those experiences compare to doing stuff for publishers, doing book covers and that kind of thing. Alyssa, you said it was a lot more streamlined than the stuff that you're seeing on a day-to-day basis. But if any of you want to jump in and add a little bit more comparison between those industries and publishing and book covers.
Well, I'm happy to chime in. I would agree that book covers, by comparison, are pretty straightforward and rewarding, and it's just the fact that the project stretches over a few weeks and it's done. It's if you are happy with the results, you enjoy that high briefly, and if it's not, you put it behind you. While video games development takes years, and it's a kind of an emotional roller coaster with satisfactions and frustrations of all kind, and so it's an ongoing thing. It's like a chronic condition versus a quick cold. Yeah, but it's rewarding nonetheless. My favorite part of video games development and art direction isn't necessarily the doing concept art, but in a broader sense, IP development and kind of the ideation and doing what I call inspirational art rather than production design or blueprints for production. So, and that's really engaging. And also there's the aspect of building art teams and mentoring artists, attracting talent. It's super rewarding. I mean, the many artists that started their careers working for me that I hired straight out of school, like Jamie Jones and Richard Anderson and Keikai Kotaki and Levi Hawkins and a whole slew of Theo Prince. They are huge nowadays, are just rock stars, and they all got their first opportunity working on my team, and nothing's as rewarding as feeling that, or as knowing that you've had a role in their formation, and you've basically shared everything you knew to help them grow, and then also knowing when to let them go and spread their wings and take off and go somewhere else. So that's very satisfying.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I didn't know Jamie Jones was on Guild Wars. He's at top right now. He's like master.
He's a freak of nature. I mean,
Yeah.
he's the thing. And Jamie Jones was still in school. I think he was in the 4th year and on a full scholarship. And I discovered him, online, and I contacted him and said, "Hey, dude, are you really learning anything?" And she said, "Well, truth be told, I don't feel like I'm learning anything, but I'm on this. I have this sweet deal on a full scholarship, and my mom would kill me if I gave it up." And I said, "Well, can I talk to your mom?" And basically, I explained that the kid is wasting his time, and he'll learn more if he really gets his hands dirty and experiences the realities of the industry. And he did. And many years he was on my team, and then at one point he decided, hey, I think I've learned as much as I can here. And I said, I can't agree more. It's been a while now that I've been learning from him, and so by all means, fly away. And he did. And that the word, he's not the only one. Quite a slew of really. But I don't want to take any credit for who he is now. The guy had work ethics and determination and maturity way beyond his age. I mean, when he was 19, he would talk like an old wise guy about art, and blew my mind.
Yeah, it's about giving them the platform to realize their potential, essentially. Yeah, Priscilla, you wanted to say something?
Going back a little, as far as the differences that I've seen, I haven't actually worked as a concept artist in a studio, but given as I worked next to alongside concept artists for a while, the differences I saw versus doing book cover stuff was just basically a lot more iteration in concepts. Obviously, it's not really about the finished product as much either. It's the ideation, as Nina mentioned, and it's also, I feel like, a lot easier for your work to just disappear and not ever be seen again when you're doing concept stuff in a studio, especially if the project gets canceled. But even if it doesn't, the ability to release that stuff is not really necessarily up to you. And comparing that to entertainment, like so film and TV stuff, it feels like the timelines for film and TV and editorial are super short, but the pay is super high also, comparatively, because of that intense timeline and iterating back and forth.
Yeah, and also the crazy investments that go into film and TV. Although video games is pretty much on par with that, just millions and millions of dollars.
I think film is still another degree beyond that, because I mean, a 10 million film is a tiny film.
Well, 10 million game is a tiny game.
Nowadays, it's getting pretty small. It's
100 million game it's starting to be something, and it's not unheard of games going into 500 million and beyond, and it's crazy, absolutely crazy.
Yeah. Alyssa, do you have any?
Yeah, the budgets for games are definitely inflated so much.
Yeah, for sure. Alyssa, do you have any experiences from video games that you wanted to share and sort of related to book publishing?
I think one big difference that I noticed is like books kind of live way more in isolation than when you're in development on a video game. Is there's just on games there's so many dependencies. Like your work touches everybody else's work, and as things develop, what you're working on might diverge. And so when you see what other sections are doing, you might have to kind of take it back in or like go back and like kind of keep everything going. And I think kind of what Daniel was saying about it just being a much more organic process of like working and developing as you go. You can't really figure it out just at the beginning. That process is just so different compared to book covers, which in my experience has been very like series is the closest it gets. It's like I have to relate to my past self or like adapt to what the author's doing now, and like that's as close as it gets for me. But yeah, games feel very unique in that way.
Yeah, and in terms of this uniqueness, Luke, you have the most experience with doing interior book design and playing with things like typography and that kind of thing. Can you elaborate a little bit on your experiences with that and how you approach that in contrast to the more artistic visual representation that you see on a cover?
Yeah. So most of my interiors I've done for myself, but I think one of the things that some people don't really appreciate is the presentation of the interior of the book, and it's not just necessarily like interior art or chapter headers or anything like that. It's the actual, typography and formatting on the page. Because if the book comes too close to the edge of the page or too wide, it's definitely going to look odd. I've had my own experiences with that, but it it ties into the cover in a way that I think it ties into the cover as you're trying to make it as unique experience as possible. At least that's the way I approach it. I want people to be able to, not strain their eyes, obviously, when they're reading. I want it to be a very, smooth process.
Yeah, because I think this is especially prevalent in self-publishing where the books are usually print on demand or they're printed with a small press, that kind of thing. And there's not a huge team behind a book who's doing exactly what you said, making sure that the space between the text and the end and the sides of the page are you know enough that people feel like they're progressing through the book, but at the same time they're not spending so much time on a single page. And I have some self-published books where it's like there's like a pinky or less in between the words and the page, and I feel like I'm just like trying to wrap my head around the layout, and it jars me and kind of pulls me out of the actual story itself, which is I think just a shitty side effect of me being an artist and a reader and enjoying these things, but at the same time my design instinct is saying like no, it's not working.
It's funny. It's a lot of the traditionally published stuff now, not so much the self-publish, because obviously, budget is a thing that they have to adhere to. You see frequently, especially with the longer books, these like a smaller and smaller print size, and for me, like that's hard to look at for even like 20 minutes. It's hard to pay attention to, and I feel like for me that's actually part of the reason why I've switched primarily to audiobooks within the last year.
Yeah, and I want to get into how, since all of you have taken different paths in order to get where you are, I'll toss this to you first, Felix. How you promote yourself as an artist, and advice that you can give to aspiring artists, people who are listening to this or watching and want to get into cover design.
I honestly, at this point, I feel like I sold my soul to the devil, and that's where, because it's, I don't. So the way I started was doing fan art and putting on online, on social media. Like I like a book, I always liked that stuff. When I was a kid, I would do D&D and Lord of the Rings, stuff like that. And then with the indie industry, after I read Abercrombie, I started reading all these other people. Joe Abercrombie. Then I started reading all the indies, and like, oh, this is so amazing. I started doing fan art and just posting it, and that was my marketing. And then when they started hiring me, well, I would post the cover. So that's the marketing, and then word of mouth took over. So it's a mix of I just post my stuff on Facebook and ArtStation, and that's it. That's pretty much. I don't really do ads. I don't. It's a long process though. It took a few years to take off, but it happened so organically that it gave me time to develop and make connections and I guess make a reputation. And that was pretty much it. It was like a slow process, but marketing itself, that's it. That's pretty much what I did. Yeah.
It's like word of mouth type thing, right?
And I guess word of mouth for newer artists, I feel like you really have to put a lot of time on education and practice. Like I would spend hours of the day just watching videos online of the pros, like buying Gumroad, they have the tutorials, or there's like right now. When I was a kid, back in the 80s, there was not even internet. Now you can buy a class online and just watch the whole thing. Like, they're just everything you need is online. And I would say, if you're starting out, watch, practice, learn, make connections with other artists and professionals, if you can, and put yourself out there. And I think it's a long process. For some people it takes less, I guess, but I think you really have to want to be an artist, because there's so many people out there doing the same thing. So you really have to have grit and focus, and you really want to have learn and self-edit, like look at your work and say, hey, this can be better. Like, don't be happy where you at, or just a little degree higher. Look up to the great artists, and if you're halfway that level, great, but look, like, point all the way up. That's the only way, I think.
Yeah, and Daniel, you've touched on this as well. Just grit, hard work, have a passion for it. You don't have to be a wise old man or anything like that, but really dedicate yourself to learning. Does anyone else want to share how they promote themselves in this space, but also advice for aspiring artists and people who want to get involved in all this? If anyone wants to jump in.
I'll go. Oh, no, go ahead, Priscilla.
Go ahead. I think it's going to be a bit random. So.
Okay. Well,
Alyssa, and then Priscilla afterwards.
Okay. I'm terrible at marketing myself on social media. People have no idea who I am. It's not great. I was really fortunate. I got my start in book covers because of a portfolio review I did at a convention with one of my future art directors, Irene Gallo. And kind of what Felix was saying is, like, education is so much more accessible than ever before. And I think a lot of industry professionals actually are very accessible. I've seen so many opportunities for not just like art directors looking for artist specific portfolio reviews, but just random artists in the industry are really generous and host portfolio reviews. So if you want to get a sense of if it's hard for you to be like, where am I compared to those great artists, getting some professional eyes for specifically the corner of the industry that you really want to, because there's different standards for all different sections. So seeking out one of those professionals and being like, hey, like, being polite, of course, can you take a look and give me some hints? Like, that stuff is really great. And I think also getting comfortable with asking questions of all the people around you. Like, once you're in the industry, like, they are your resources. All the people around you, they know so much. And usually everybody's really, really nice. So definitely ask those questions, and also ask questions of yourself. I find, and I still do this, like, a lot of times I'll look at my art and I'll be like, well, that's bad, but like thinking about like why it's bad, and, being like, why am I unsatisfied with this? I often see folks kind of get in a rut where they're just like making the same mistakes for years, instead of like really stopping and like turning on the critique brain you use on other people's art on your own art, and being specific and not just getting down on yourself, but being constructive about it. So that's my advice, no matter where you are, skill wise.
I think that applies to life in general. Just learn how to critique yourself and learn from your mistakes and move forward with a better attitude and a better approach. Priscilla, you want to go for it?
Self-knowledge is the greatest gift you can give yourself.
Exactly.
But on top of everything else that was said, I think also goal setting and kind of figuring out what you want to do and what specifically you're aiming for really helps a lot. And I know this is always an easy question to answer, especially if you have a lot of different interests and you like a lot of things, but kind of figuring out what you like to do, which may not be the same thing as what you like to look at, honestly, is, I think, pretty important for figuring out where you want to go. And for me, I honestly can't really trace how I got to where I am. I think a lot of it was just going to in-person meetings and conventions and making friends with people and doing portfolio reviews, and occasionally people will keep my contact info. And at a certain point, I don't know where people are finding me. They just show up in my email inbox. So, yeah, I've mostly been able to, I think, get where I am because I've been able to take courses with very accessible and very knowledgeable mentors and peers. And I think the peers part is important as well. You don't want to just like pursue knowledge from people who are way above you. You also want to make friends with people who are at your similar level, so you can help each other up and take advantage of everything that is out there. There's so much free stuff. I do think the kids these days are actually benefiting from that, though, because I feel like I keep seeing younger and younger people who are amazing.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, but it's also.
I will also say.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. One more thing. I do sometimes feel like I see an overemphasis on social media presence as being a key part of success, and I do think it can be a marker of success or a path to success, but it's not the only one. Certainly, I have very few followers. I'm not good at social media either, or self promotion. But
I think follower count a lot of the time it doesn't count for nothing. It's not like it counts for shit, but it doesn't count for everything. And so you bring up a good point there.
Translate.
Don't assume that the amount of followers that you have on ArtStation or Instagram or Twitter or whatever counts for so much, because a lot of that can be artificial. There are bots out there, but there are also people who pay for followers. So don't just assume. But you also touched on resources. I think, yes, there's an immense amount of resources of tutorials and stuff on YouTube, stuff that's free, or paid classes on different online education platforms. But another thing is the accessibility of technology and the stuff that people can actually use to draw. It doesn't necessarily mean like, you have to go to an art store and know everything about every different medium. It's like you can get an iPad and an Apple Pencil and just create. I think Procreate is $10 or something like that. It's nothing. And so the accessibility to art technology is unbelievably advanced compared to when we were kids. So it's like, doesn't matter what age you are, you can, if you have the means to get that kind of stuff, but then it comes down to, if you just have a pencil and a piece of paper, you can already start too. So the entrance to art is endless. And Luke, if you want to share a little bit about your experience with promoting yourself, but then also advice for those who are looking to get into the game.
I'm the worst person to ask about that.
Don't laugh, man. Take yourself seriously.
I do take myself seriously, but I'm being honest. I just kind of stumble into things, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I think as far as promotion goes, being your most genuine is always going to help. Especially, and this touches back on the social media thing too. Like, it comes down to, like I said, being genuine. You don't want to be one of those people who just constantly like spams. Like, people want to, interact with an actual person, have conversations. And I think just, making connections. And I think that sort of touches in the writing too, with the writing community, is don't you can look at other people's resources, which, in professions they are, but you don't want to look at them as like, rungs on a ladder. You want to make personal connections, not just like use people.
Meaningful connections.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Because doing this podcast is the kind of thing where I have made so many meaningful connections, and it's not like, oh, this author is so big and I want to have them on the podcast for the name recognition or some crap like that. But it's like, no, it's more about the content they produce. With all of you, it's the content you produce and the genuine nature through which you put it out into the world. And I really appreciate that. And Daniel, since you're the most experienced here, if you want to share a little bit about your promotion. I guess at this point, a lot of people are coming to you as opposed to you promoting yourself, but also advice for newcomers to the industry.
Yeah, for you, other than a few short interruptions or gaps between jobs in the past, I've always been employed full time. Therefore, I only had limited time for freelance work. And I was lucky enough to get enough work uh, to fill my weekends. Never really had the need to promote myself. Um, that being said, as far as social media presence, I other than ArtStation, I don't do Facebook, I don't do Instagram, I don't do any of that. Uh, I I'm a big believer in networking, especially encourage young artists to network, but network selectively, and uh, pay attention to the feedback you get, and don't get uh, too confident simply because you get hundreds of, you know, thumbs up and hearts and smileys
Dopamine rush.
on whatever, because and praises uh, on any forums, because it's very likely that the majority of them come from 12-year-olds who have no clue what they're talking about, and you know, they get excited and go gaga over anything, and just to shower uh, people with praises. Rather, identify a few people you look up to and try to seek their genuine feedback, and make that type of meaningful contact. Um, as far as access to information, and as internet as a resource, it is absolutely mind blowing, and its depth is endless. That being said, it's a mixed blessing. It can be confusing. There can be too many conflicting influences and temptations, and oh my God, there's this style and this style, and which way should I go? And also same thing applies to all these tutorials, where every one you watch, you're like, oh my God, that's what I should do. I don't think that's the right attitude towards self-improvement, but rather, as Alyssa was saying, honing your critical thinking and absorbing as much, but then with a critical eye. Don't be just a consumer, but an analyst, a critical thinker, and deconstruct what you're seeing, and assemble out of the building blocks that you extract, assemble your own system of values, and your own philosophy, and the style. Your own style will become the natural expression of that. There's, nowadays, with, as you said, with an iPad and a pen and a $10 piece of software, you can you get the entry level into this world of artistic expression, but that shouldn't that's not enough to call yourself an artist. And there's uh, it's a mixed blessing. I mean, on one hand, the access to information and to learning is there, but on the other hand, you have to overcome the noise and the millions of people who are out there, making noise, adding to the noise, and basically drowning the talent in this noise, and learning to swim to the surface of this noise is really challenging. There's I get portfolios every day, not one but multiple portfolios, and people who want to get a foot in the door, and it is mind blowing how high the percentage of people who have no business owning a pencil. They should have restraining orders from pencils. I worry that they may hurt themselves. Make sure it's not too sharp for you, because I mean, it's just really. So, I put myself in the shoes of the truly talented and hardworking one, and the fact that they have to push out of their way or whatever to kind of navigate through all this noise is just feels like an overwhelming monumental task. And so I would never in full-heartedly advise somebody, hey, try to become an artist. That's the ticket. That's the way to a good living. I can't do it, because knowing the obstacles and the hard work and the grit, and not to beat around the bushes, but the role of pure luck that it takes to succeed. So my heart goes out to them, but I wouldn't want to be 20 again in this landscape now.
Yeah. Well, does anyone have some final comments on how, I completely agree with you, Daniel, that it is a sea of noise and it's very difficult to push through, but that applies to pretty much every field, honestly. And with the hard work, with the grit, with the talent, it's not guaranteed that you will push through and make it. But does anyone have some final comments on potential means by which people could, make themselves stand out just a little bit more?
Don't, but I really have to go. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah.
But thank you for having me on.
Oh, Priscilla, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
Does anyone have any ideas on how artists can make themselves stand out a little bit more? Not necessarily push through all the noise, but
I guess it depends on the niche. Also, what you're looking to do has a lot of impact on being an artist. Like what I'm doing right now is, there's so many of them, but if you have a style and a niche, like the Grimdark group, I feel like you just need to find it. If you want to get into gaming, like with Daniel, I think it's a lot harder, because I don't know. I think it's more of a trend to go into that field. The art style at the moment. Like if you go on ArtStation, everybody. So many people. So illustration might be easier in a certain niche. I don't know. I think you just have to really dig and really research, learn. Just keep at it, like really keep at it. And I think it happens. For some people, it's faster than with others. But at some point, if you put the energy, it pays off at some point. It can be years. It can be, it's subjective at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Anyone else with some final comments?
I think it's kind of related to Felix's thing about research. It's like, maybe just be a person. I think when your number one passion is like looking at concept art, sometimes that can be really limiting because you're just going to regurgitate everything that you're seeing. But if your passion is, say, Russian architecture, and you just really love looking at it, learning about it, that's going to come into your work, and your work's going to look different than somebody who isn't super into Russian architecture, which again may or may not be helpful for you depending on where you're trying to go in the industry. But like, I think having interests and hobbies and things you're excited about learning that's not just art, I think is helpful. I've known people who don't have interest outside of art who do great, but I think just generally it's probably good for your mental health anyway.
Yeah.
I think it's beyond good for your health. I think you're absolutely spot on. Whatever you do artistically has to be an honest, genuine expression of the things that interest and eat you alive, whatever they are. You know, when you pursue just style, indeed, it's confusing and it's superficial and it's not who you are. But as you said, be a genuine person, and be vulnerable, and be open to absorbing influences from the world around you, and be observant, and eventually it will accumulate and simmer and result in this kind of primordial soup that is makes you who you are, and eventually, inevitably, you'll feel this irresistible urge to share that. And if you do it honestly, that's your style, that's your art, and take it or leave it. And if it's if the emotions that you are sharing are of more universal relevance, then they'll resonate and you'll be successful. If your interests are very, very narrow, and whatever, you are obsessed with something that nobody else is obsessed with, then you'll be your only fan. But the bottom line is, it has to be sincere and genuine and come from inside.
Mm-hmm. I think that is a perfect note to end on. I want to thank you all for being here, but before we close, if each of you could recommend an artist, someone whose work that you really appreciate, who you admire, that you want to share with everybody as a recommendation to check out. We'll start with you, Felix.
Me? Oh, can you start with Daniel? Daniel will have a lot more and better people.
No, we're starting with you. I chose you.
Me? Oh man. Well, we already mentioned a few from that Guild Wars school. I mean, I discovered all these people when they started back then. As soon as that game came out, I never played it, but I knew all the concept art, all the advertising, the videos, the everything. I devoured the whole media. I never played it.
I'd never played it either.
Yeah, but all these names, Kekai Kotaki, Ruan Jia, all the people
Ruan
you just
Jia,
mentioned.
yeah, good lord.
He's a god. We were talking before earlier about him, because his level of rendering is absurd. He will transport you whatever he wants to. So I would say he's a good name to look up, because his work is kind of fine arts, really, at that level, I think.
And he was literally sitting next to me, so I got to for a long time to observe his methodology and his process. Mm-hmm. And he gets to 80% in no time, in a matter of hours.
Crazy.
And it looks mind-blowing and better than anything I could possibly achieve. But then, if you leave him alone, he'll go at it for another 3 weeks, and you may ask yourself, was this really worth it? But once you start zooming in, and it's not about accuracy of detail or precision or something. It almost looks like every pixel consists of multiple colors, which is a paradox and impossibility. But every single tiny little, the smallest unit of surface, it consists of a multitude of colors, and the vibration up close. It's just I can inspect one of his pieces forever and never get bored of it. I don't know where that comes from. And he's the nicest guy ever, and really humble. And all of these guys, that's one thing they have in common. Jamie Jones, Kekai, Richard, Ruan Jia. super, super humble, super hardworking, down to earth, funny, nice people.
Amazing. And Alyssa, what about you? Do you have an artist recommendation?
Yes, which I'm relieved about because I'm actually really bad at remembering names. Kathleen Jennings. She's actually a writer and an artist. She's Australian, and she often works with these paper cut silhouettes to create her book covers and her art. And it's that kind of work that's, it looks really simple, but it's really, really hard. But what I most appreciate about her is she does all these journal thoughts on art, thoughts on writing, and it's just always exciting to see that passion that's sort of kind of about the craft and about things, beyond just seeing the image. So that's something I really like about her.
Cool. And then is that on her personal website that you can find that
I
stuff?
think so. Yeah, she's got her work, and I think also it connects to a blog, and you can read her thoughts there.
Awesome. And Luke, what about you? An artist recommendation?
Yeah. So I found Peter Morbacher. I found through Instagram. He does the Angelarium stuff, which is just really, it's super cool, very ethereal. But I also I've really gotten into Jeremy Wilson's stuff. He uses a lot of negative space, which is something I'm trying to improve on because I think it adds it always comes out interesting.
Nice. And Daniel, we'll finish off with you if you have a recommendation for an artist.
I admire grit a lot, and when it comes to grit, the most inspiring artists are the guys who did it the hard way. The Renaissance artists. I mean, look at Pietà. The guy did it out of marble at 21.
Yeah.
Top that. Good luck. All right. End of discussion.
Who at this age is working with marble anymore, anyways?
Yeah,
So we don't have the talent.
Just that kind of vision and willingness to roll up your sleeves and do things the hard way at that age. That's to me so inspiring. I remember when I back in Florence went to the museum where his work was, and the guide showed us one of his slaves, this really kind of rough, gorgeous but rough sculpture towards later in his life, and he said, check out this thing, and he showed us behind on the back of the block there was this self-portrait of Michelangelo that he chiseled real quick, and he said that was the way he was marking the blocks. He would go to the quarry and pick a block, and to make sure they don't cheat him and then deliver a different block, a cheaper, another, piece of stone, he would take the chisels and quick do a self-portrait on the back, and good luck replicating that. It's like,
just putting my stamp on it.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Try beating that.
Yeah.
So can't. Oh my God.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining me. Just really quickly, if you could let listeners and viewers know where they can find your work, whether that's Instagram, Twitter, ArtStation, personal website, what have you. Felix?
You can find me on Facebook, Felix Ortiz, and same with ArtStation. Just look up Felix Ortiz, and it's pretty. Yeah, that's the two places. I mean, I have Instagram and Twitter, but I don't really use those. I don't have the time, but yeah, ArtStation, I would say.
Cool. Yeah. And Alyssa, where can people find you?
Most of my real work lives on alyssawinans.com, and then if you're interested in seeing my pen sketches, which are totally different, I'm on Instagram as ALA Winans. So those are the two main places.
Cool. And Luke?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Luke _Tarzian, or website as well, tarzianbookdesign.com.
Fantastic. And Daniel?
The only place I post stuff is on ArtStation. I haven't posted any recent work in 2 years because it's all still unpublished, but it's building up. I've been working more intensely than ever, and soon I think I'll get to the point where I am allowed to post a whole bunch of stuff. So hopefully it will be well received.
There's going to be a massive explosion of Daniel Dociu artwork coming.
That's my plan.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing all that, and thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate it. This is an amazing opportunity for me because I love science fiction and fantasy. I love books, but I also love art, and I'm very passionate about it. So to be able to talk about all this with all of you, hear your experiences, has been very meaningful. So Felix, Alyssa, Luke, Daniel, and Priscilla, she had to leave early, but thank you all for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah.